Queen Leora sat in her great hall, the light from the high windows falling across the floor of white stone. The crown on her head felt heavier every year, and the gold she wore did not bring her peace. God. All around her stood people who smiled and bowed, but their eyes always hid some plan, some secret wish to use her name for their gain. When she was young, Leora had believed in kindness. She had thought that people were good by nature, and that love was the one thing that could never be broken. But as the years passed, she saw too many lies. Men came to her court with sweet words, promising loyalty and affection, yet their hearts were full of greed and pride. One noble had sworn that he wished to protect her lands, only to lead her army into a useless fight that cost hundreds of lives. Another man had promised her devotion, then tried to steal her crown through deceit. Every broken promise built a wall inside her. Leora began to believe that people were not worthy of love at all. She could rule them, teach them, and protect them, but she would not trust them. Each day she gave orders and signed decrees with a steady hand, and her face never showed emotion. Her servants whispered that their queen's heart had turned to glass beautiful, but unable to feel warmth.
How nice.
Her palace was full of life, yet it was also silent. Musicians played soft songs, but none dared to lift their eyes toward her. When she walked through the gardens, the guards followed at a distance, their boots loud against the stone paths. The flowers around her bloomed in the sun, but she noticed none of them. One evening, as she looked over the city from her balcony, the scent of rain mixed with smoke rose from below. She had built a kingdom of strong walls and busy markets, yet she felt alone among thousands of people. She whispered to herself that humans only cared for themselves. They fought, they betrayed, and they forgot what love meant. Beyond the borders of her land, trouble was growing. Farmlands near the northern mountains had been taken by raiders. Villages were set on fire, and families fled south for safety. Reports reached the court every week, and still the queen could not find a leader she trusted to lead her army. Her council suggested many names. Each man and woman who stood before her promised courage and loyalty, but she had seen those words crumble before. Some were too proud, some too eager for fame, and others too cowardly behind their brave speeches. So Leora waited. She thought, if none among her people were true, then she would defend the realm by command alone. She no longer believed one person could make a difference. That night, as the rain finally began to fall against her windows, she walked through the silent halls of her palace and wondered when she had stopped believing in love. There had been a time, long ago, when she dreamed of someone who might see her not as a queen, but as a woman who wished for peace. That dream now seemed foolish. Still, the thought stayed with her. A strange emptiness settled inside her chest, like a space that wanted to be filled, but could not be. Some days later, a message arrived from the south frontier, spoke of a soldier named Ethan Hale, a man who had led small groups of farmers and traders against bandits and kept their homes safe for nearly a year. His victories were quiet but real, and the people called him the steadfast man because he refused payment beyond the food he needed. Leora read the name without interest. Many soldiers had been praised before, only to disappoint her. But the reports continued. Idason's men did not steal, they did not burn, and they did not run. Even his enemies said he fought with honor. The queen looked out over her hall again, feeling the same endless weight as always. She was tired of false hearts and charming faces. She told herself it did not matter who this soldier was. Humanity could never change. Yet something in her heart did not fully agree this time. Perhaps it was only loneliness or the rain still whispering at her windows that night. But for the first time in years, she wondered what kind of man fought wars without asking for reward. She turned the report over and signed her name at the bottom, giving permission for this soldier to come to the capital. She did not know why she cared to meet him. She told herself it was simple duty. But as she sealed the letter, her mind was not as calm as it had been. Outside, the storm cleared. Morning light touched the stones of the city below like a quiet promise. The queen stood at her balcony again and said softly, almost without meaning to, "Perhaps there are still a few good hearts left in this world." Then she straightened, brushed away the thought, and went to her council room. She did not yet know that this single choice would change everything in her life. Ethan Hale had never seen the great capital of Aurelian before. When the message bearing the queen's seal reached his small camp, He could hardly believe it. He was a soldier from the far provinces, used to rough ground and quiet people, not shining palaces or royal commands. Still, the letter was clear. The queen herself wished to meet him. He rode for several days through green fields and towns that had seen better days. Everywhere he passed, people greeted him with respect. Not because he dressed as a noble, but because he had helped them during the dark times when raiders stole food and burned barns. He answered their bows with a smile, though he never stayed long. When he reached the city gates, the guards looked at him with interest. His armor was plain and worn, his sword clean but simple. He had no banner, no servants, only a horse and a travel cloak. The captain at the gate asked for his name. Ethan spoke it calmly, and the man's eyes widened at once. A messenger was sent ahead. Soon Ethan was led through busy streets toward the tall palace where Queen Leora waited. Inside the palace, everything shone. The floors were white marble, the walls covered with delicate carvings of the kingdom's history. Ethan felt far from home. He had spent most of his life in fields and river valleys, where the earth smelled of rain and smoke. Here, the air was filled with perfume and the rustle of silk. When he entered the hall, Queen Leora sat upon her throne, surrounded by her council. She looked left and right at the men and women who waited for her signal to speak, but when Ethan walked forward, she raised a hand, and the room fell silent. He bowed low. He had never spoken to a queen before. The hall itself seemed to hold its breath. "You are Ethan Hale," she said, her voice calm and smooth. "Yes, your majesty," he answered quietly. "They tell me you fight without pay," she said. "Why would a man risk his life for no reward?" Ethan looked at the marble floor as he spoke. "Because if someone does not stand between good people and harm, then harm wins. I was born in a small town. I know what it is to lose your home to fear." The queen tilted her head, studying him with sharp eyes. She had heard many fine answers in her time, and most of them were meant to please her. This man's words held no polish, yet they struck with truth. "You think one man can stop a war?" she asked. "No, your majesty," he said. "But one man can show others that it is worth trying." The court whispered softly among themselves. The queen rested her chin on her hand, releasing a slow breath. Ethan stood still, unsure if he had angered her. After a moment, she said, "You have done well on the borders. I have need of a leader who fights not for pride but for peace. Do you accept this burden?" He nodded once, firm and sure. "I will serve." That evening, as the sun fell behind the roofs of the city, Ethan was given a small chamber in the palace. He looked out from his window at the lights spreading through the streets like stars. The sound of laughter drifted upward, and it made him smile faintly. He had seen enough sorrow to know how precious peace was. In another wing of the palace, Leora paced her silent garden. The meeting troubled her in ways she did not expect. She had planned only to test the stories about this soldier, to find his flaws quickly as she had done with others. Yet his quiet honesty unsettled her. He spoke of duty without seeking favor. He looked at her as though she were not just a crown on a chair, but a person of flesh and heart. It had been many years since she had felt that look. The next morning, she asked to see him again. He spoke of borders, supplies, and the coming campaigns. She noticed how he listened. When one of her advisors interrupted, Ethan waited, never forcing his voice to rise above anyone else's. When Leora spoke to him directly, his eyes stayed on hers, without fear or flattery. Days turned into weeks. Orders were given, troops were moved, and the queen found reasons to keep him near the court longer than needed. They would often walk through the training grounds together, discussing strength and mercy. Ethan told her of the farmers who followed him, people who had nothing but courage. She told him of the crown's weight, and how power could make hearts cold. Ethan only nodded. "Then keep those who remind you of warmth, your majesty," he said softly. Leora did not answer, but his words stayed in her mind that night. She found herself watching the window where his lamp still burned in the servants' quarters below. In her quiet heart, a small doubt began to form against her old belief that humans were unworthy of love. She did not yet trust it, nor could she name it. But for the first time in years, the queen felt something she had forgotten long ago. And though she pushed it away in daylight, each night it returned, whispering in the silence of her grand empty halls that perhaps one honest man could be enough to change everything. The cold season came early that year. Clouds rolled over the hills, and heavy rain turned the roads into rivers of mud. In the royal court, Queen Leora stood by the tall windows, watching the storm sweep over the city. Her thoughts were far from the marble floor and gold banners around her. War was drawing close again. Reports had arrived that enemy armies were marching toward the northern plains. Ethan Hale had been training the soldiers for weeks. He spent long hours on the practice field, showing them how to move as one, how to use their shields well, how to fight with focus instead of anger. The younger soldiers respected him deeply. They said he could see every weakness in a line before anyone else did. But what earned their loyalty most was that he fought beside them instead of above them. Leora sometimes watched the training from a balcony. Rain or sun, Ethan never raised his voice. When a soldier made a mistake, he fixed it with patience, not pride. The queen had known generals who ruled their men by fear, but this one ruled by example. She found herself wondering what it would be like to have that kind of heart, leading an entire nation. A council meeting was held when word came that the enemy had crossed the border. Some advisors said to stay behind the walls of the capital and wait. Others begged the queen to hire more mercenaries. The court argued for hours. Ethan stood quietly until the queen turned to him. "What would you have us do?" she asked. He spoke plainly. "If we hide, the villages will burn. If we wait too long, the enemy will grow bolder. We must meet them at the river plains.
Ow.
The ground there is open. We can protect the trade routes and towns behind it." The advisors frowned and whispered among themselves. The queen watched his face and saw no trace of greed or fear, only a quiet duty. She gave her answer at last. "Then we go to the river plains, and I will ride with the army." The hall went silent. No one had expected her to say that. Many tried to argue that it was too dangerous, but the queen's word was final. The next morning, the army left the capital. Hundreds of horses filled the roads, banners of gold, and blue streaming in the wind. The people watched from the walls, cheering softly. Ethan rode near the front, his plain armor now shining from a fresh polish. Queen Leora rode beside him, her cloak lined with silver thread. They spoke little, yet every word between them seemed weighed with meaning. At night, they camped by the river. The soldiers built fires and sang songs to keep their spirits high. Leora walked among them quietly, listening to their laughter. She had once believed her people cared only for power and greed, but now she saw simple hearts, loyal and brave, who fought not for gold but for home and family. Ethan's example had changed them. His kindness spread like sunlight through the army. Later that evening, she found him sitting by his tent mending a torn glove. The firelight touched his face, showing lines of weariness, but also calm strength. She sat across from him and said, "You make them believe they can win." He looked up. "They already believe, Your Majesty. They just needed to be reminded." His words were humble, yet they reached deep into her. For a moment, she forgot the crown and the war, and simply listened to the sound of the river beside them. The air smelled of wet grass and smoke. The next day, they marched again, and by sunset, the two armies faced each other across the plains. The enemy's numbers were greater, but the heart of Leora's soldiers was fierce. When battle began, Ethan rode forward with clear eyes and steady voice, calling orders that cut through the noise. The queen watched from a nearby rise, her heart tight with fear. The battle lasted until the sky turned red. Ethan's plans worked well, though the fighting was fierce and many fell. In one moment of danger, when the enemy nearly broke through the center line, he rode straight into the thick of it, rallying the men with his calm courage. His horse was struck, and he fell. But he rose again with his sword and pushed forward until the enemy began to retreat. When darkness came at last, the plain was quiet, except for the cries of the wounded and the soft rustle of banners in the night wind. The battle was won, but at great cost. Leora walked among the tents, helping where she could, refusing rest until she found Ethan. He stood near the river, his arm bleeding through his sleeve, his eyes still sharp. She told him softly, "You kept your promise. You stood between good people and harm." He smiled faintly. It was not only me, it was all of us. As she looked at him in the flickering firelight, the walls inside her heart that had been built from distrust and sorrow began to crack just a little more. She turned away before he could see her eyes, afraid of what he might find there. But that night, as she lay awake under the sound of rain, she knew something within her was changing forever. The morning after the battle came slow and pale, Mist covered the river, soft and cold. Soldiers moved quietly through the camp, wrapping the fallen and gathering supplies. Some sang low songs to honor their friends. Queen Leora walked among them, her gown torn and marked with dust. She had never seen such bravery nor such pain. Ethan Hale stood not far away, his arm bandaged tightly, giving calm orders to a group of tired men. When he saw the queen approach, he bowed with his good arm. She told him to stand. "You are hurt," she said. "It is nothing," he answered, though his face was pale. "The wound will heal." "You have already done more than anyone could ask," Leora said quietly. "Rest for a while. The kingdom owes you peace." Ethan smiled slightly. "Peace is not mine alone to keep, Your Majesty. The villages still need rebuilding. The enemy may come again." She wanted to tell him that someone else could take his place, but she knew he would not agree. He reminded her of the mountains beyond her, city-strong, steady, and unchanging. For a long moment they stood in silence, hearing only the wind and the slow movement of the river. In the days that followed, the army began to return to the capital. People lined the roads, cheering for their soldiers. When they saw Ethan and the Queen riding side by side, their voices grew louder. To them, it looked like hope itself had come home. At the palace, a great feast was held to celebrate the victory. Leora sat on the high throne as nobles spoke of courage and victory, but her eyes searched the hall for one face. When she saw Ethan standing among the guards at the edge of the crowd, she felt a warmth she tried to hide. After the feast ended and the guests drifted away, she found him by the courtyard fountain. The night was cool, and the sound of water echoed softly between the walls. "Why do you stand alone when everyone wishes to honor you?" she asked. "I am no nobleman," Ethan said simply. "But the celebration is theirs." "I am only a soldier." "You are more than that," she said gently. "You have given this kingdom its heart again." He looked at the ground, unsure what to say. The moonlight touched the edges of his tired face. "You speak kindly, Your Majesty," he said, "but I only did my duty. For so long," she said, "I believed that duty was all humans cared for. That love and mercy were too weak to survive in a world full of greed. But you proved me wrong." He looked at her then, surprised by the softness in her voice. Her eyes no longer held the cold distance of a ruler. They carried something warm and uncertain, something he had never seen in them before. "I do not know what I proved," Ethan said quietly, "but I am glad if it gave you hope." For a moment, the Queen wanted to speak her heart fully, to tell him how deeply he had changed her view of her own people and of herself. But the weight of the crown still pressed on her shoulders, and she could not find the courage to cross that final distance between them. So she smiled faintly and turned away. Days became weeks again. Ethan stayed in the capital, helping the council plan new defenses and rebuild the burned villages. He trained new soldiers and spoke often with the common people. The Queen met with him almost every day, first for work and then slowly for quiet conversation. They talked of simple things, childhood dreams, the sea she had never seen, the quiet hills where he was born. The more they spoke, the less she felt like a queen, and the more she felt like a woman who had found someone who truly understood her silence. But not all in the court were pleased. Some nobles whispered that the Queen favored her soldier too strongly. One evening, Leora's oldest advisor warned her that such closeness might cause unrest among the lords who still dreamed of her power. She said nothing in reply, but her heart grew heavy. She realized that love, if this feeling was love, was not easily kept beneath a crown. That night, she went to the training field, where Ethan was working late. When he saw her, he stopped and bowed. She told him the truth about the whispers, about the council's disapproval. He only smiled, calm as always. "Let them talk," he said. "Words cannot change what is right. They can change everything for a queen," she said softly. "You do not understand the price." Ethan stepped closer, his tone gentle but steady. "Then I will face the price with you, whatever burden it brings." The sound of his voice broke the last piece of ice in her heart. For once, she let go of her pride and allowed herself to feel. She looked at him for a long time, and for the first time in years, the Queen of Aurelian forgot fear. She saw in him not a soldier, nor a subject, but a man who had given her back her humanity. The wind brushed through the empty field, lifting her hair, and she whispered, "Perhaps love was never lost." It was waiting for courage to wake it. He did not answer, only took her hand gently, the faintest promise in the gesture. In that quiet moment, the queen realized that even in a world full of battles and burdens, a single honest soul could bring light to the darkest heart. Morning light touched the towers of the palace, turning them gold. The city below was already awake. Market stalls opened, children ran through the narrow streets, and bells began to ring. Queen Leora stood at her balcony, watching it all. Her heart no longer felt frozen as before. Each sound, each breath of wind, reminded her that the world she ruled was full of life worth protecting. Ethan Hale had gone to the Western Plains to rebuild one of the villages that had burned during the war. She had not seen him in 3 weeks. The palace felt large and quiet without his calm voice echoing in the halls. Each night, she found herself walking the same path through the gardens, where the two of them had spoken so many times. When word came that he was returning, her heart lifted in a way that frightened her. A queen, she reminded herself, should rise above such feelings. But no law or crown could stop her from waiting at the gate when his horse finally appeared. He looked tired, but happy. His clothes were dusty, his cloak torn at the edges, yet his smile was steady. She welcomed him with words formal and short in front of the guards, but later that evening, she sent for him to meet her in the small library where few others ever came. Ethan entered with a respectful bow. "You sent for me, Your Majesty?" "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but sure. "I wanted to thank you for what you have done. The people speak of how you helped them rebuild. They say you worked beside them, carrying wood and stone as if you were one of them. They have suffered," he said simply. Helping them was not duty, it was the only right thing to do. She smiled faintly. "You always see what is right so clearly." He looked at her for a moment and replied, "Maybe I learned that from you." His words stayed between them, soft but powerful. For a while they stood in silence, surrounded by the smell of old books and burning candles. The queen felt her pulse quicken, but she hid it behind calm eyes. Over the next months, peace returned fully to the land. The harvest was good, trade grew again, and laughter returned to the villages. Leora ruled wisely, but she no longer ruled alone in spirit. Ethan advised her often, though he never sat among nobles. She trusted his thoughts more than the finest speeches of her council. The people loved their queen even more now. They said she walked among them not as one distant and proud, but as one who knew their hopes and fears. Her rule was firm but kind. Many believed that the humble soldier beside her heart had changed more than just her life. He had changed the soul of the kingdom itself. One evening near winter, a small feast was held to honor the new peace. The hall was bright with candles, and every face shone with joy. After the feast, music filled the air. Couples moved to the center of the hall to dance. Leora had never joined such dances since she had taken the throne, but that night she stepped forward. Ethan was standing near the wall. She looked his way and said softly, "Will you dance with your queen?" The hall fell silent as he walked forward. Without a word, he took her hand and they began to move together across the marble floor. Every step seemed both strange and natural. The queen smiled, truly smiled, and for the first time, she did not care who watched. The people saw and remembered that moment for generations afterward. When the music ended, the court erupted in applause. Some eyes were wet with happiness. The nobles bowed, the people cheered, and peace seemed deeper than ever before. Later that night, Leora walked again to her balcony. Ethan joined her, standing quietly beside her. "The city lights shimmered below," she said. "When I first met you, I thought humanity was broken. I thought love was only a story told to give people false hope. But you taught me that love is not a dream or a weakness. It is the reason we keep going, even when the world is hard." He turned to her and said, "You had that love inside you all along. You only needed to see it again." She smiled at him, eyes shining under the moonlight. "And now I do." They stood together, looking at their city, the place that held both sorrow and promise. The queen who had once built her heart from stone now found peace in the simple presence of the man who had shown her what it meant to be human. Years later, the people would tell stories about Queen Leora and the soldier Ethan Hale. They would say that she ruled with wisdom and compassion, and he guided her with courage and honesty. The legends would grow. The truth would remain simple. She had thought humans unworthy of love until one man showed her how wrong she had been. In the quiet of that night, with the soft wind carrying the scent of the city's gardens, Leora finally understood something that all her power had never taught her. Love was not weakness but strength, not a treasure to be guarded but a light to be shared. And as the stars filled the sky above them, the queen and the soldier stood side by side, no longer bound by fear or doubt. They had fought wars, rebuilt what was broken, and found each other in the struggle. The world below them slept peacefully, unaware that its finest story was not written in history books but lived in two human hearts that had learned to love again,